All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Miss JD Chats, So You Think You Want a Clerkship. I'm here today with a wonderful group of current and former clerks who are here to give you the inside scoop and go behind the bench to let you know what it's like to really clerk and what it takes to be a good clerk. We'll get started with some introductions. We'll start with Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Broder. I'm an attorney at Munger, Tolson, Olson in Los Angeles. I am a corporate attorney, and I clerked in the Delaware Court of Chancery.
Awesome. Josh?
Hi, everyone. My name is Joshua Johnson. I am an attorney in the appellate group at Vincent & Elkins in DC, and I clerked at the 3 levels of the federal system. So I clerked for Judge Nancy Gertner in the District of Massachusetts in 2009 to 2010. I worked for Judge David Tatel on the DC Circuit in 2010 to 2011. And then I clerked for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in October term 2012. So that was 2012 to 2013.
Awesome. And Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Liska. I'm currently clerking on the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, and next year I'll be clerking on the DC District Court.
Awesome. And Marlo?
Hi, everyone. I'm Marlo. I'm currently clerking on the Northern District of California, and next year I'll be clerking at the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Awesome. And Rachel?
Hey everyone, I'm Rachel Tasher. I'm currently clerking for Chief Bankruptcy Judge Kathy Surratt-States in the Eastern District of Missouri.
Wonderful. All right, so our first question to get us started today is, why did you decide to clerk? And in particular, why did you choose to apply to the particular courts that you clerked at?
So I guess I'll start with that one. So I heard in law school that clerking was a really valued experience, and everyone that I spoke with who did clerk didn't regret it. I mean, they look back on it very fondly, and no one I spoke with said, oh, I wish I hadn't clerked. And so I think with that in mind, I thought, this was an experience that I too wanted to have. And I chose the courts that I applied to some federal district courts, both district and appellate and Delaware. I was interested in corporate work, and so Delaware was sort of a more natural fit given that it is a court that focuses on corporate issues. And I decided that that's where I wanted to spend my year, and it was a really fantastic experience.
Great. Josh?
I thought I wanted to do trial work when I was in law school, and kind of had visions of maybe becoming a federal prosecutor someday. Test out and see very helpful to do a district court clerkship. After I got my clerkship for an appellate clerkship and was lucky enough to get it, and then was lucky enough to get a Supreme Court clerkship. And through the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court clerkships, I kind of learned that my interests were more appellate in nature than focused on the trial court. But the original impetus for seeking a clerkship was to get day-to-day experience in the trial court and to see what that was like and learn lessons that might be helpful later in my career.
Awesome.
Similarly, I was interested in litigation, so I thought I would want to look and clerk for an appellate court since I'm more interested in appellate litigation than trial level work. And then a professor recommended I also look at trial courts as well to just kind of get that experience, a different sort of experience, and was lucky enough to get offers from the judges in DC.
Wonderful.
So I'm going to be going into a commercial litigation practice after both of my clerkships. So district court seemed the most immediately applicable in terms of getting a foundational knowledge of like the life cycle of a civil case, pretrial motions, discovery, that sort of thing. And I think the pace of the district court appealed to me a little bit more. It seemed, at least from what I've heard, to be a little less solitary and more fast-paced, which I liked. And then I think just why clerk in general, there are a lot of reasons. For me, I think the biggest was just this opportunity to kind of get an insider look into the litigation process and judicial decision making that you wouldn't get otherwise, and that you can use throughout your legal career, whatever you decide to do.
Great.
Because I actually clerk at a niche, well, what some people say would be a niche practice field, bankruptcy is very unique. I knew before going into my clerkship that I wanted to clerk for a bankruptcy judge. I think I set in my mind all year that not this summer, this spring, that I wanted to clerk and I wanted to practice bankruptcy law. So it only made sense that I transitioned into a bankruptcy clerkship. I think the relationship between the bankruptcy judges and their clerks are very close. Most bankruptcy judges only have one law clerk. So it's very intimate setting in chambers. So you learn a lot about the bankruptcy process. If your court, like mine, has a lot of big mega cases like Chapter 11, you can actually get a chance to really see a lot of the business bankruptcy side in addition to some of the consumer bankruptcy areas. So I think it gives you the best of both worlds for someone coming into a clerkship that's interested in bankruptcy litigation. It also gives you a lot of trial practice. I think that's one thing about bankruptcy court people have a myth about, is that it's all really transactional, but there's a lot of litigation in bankruptcy as well.
Okay. All right, so my next question is for Josh. Since you've clerked at all 3 levels in the court system, can you briefly tell us a little bit about how your work as a clerk was different at each level?
Absolutely. So actually the district court and court of appeals clerkships were similar in a lot of ways, because there's really not all that much difference in writing a memo on a motion for summary judgment, or writing an opinion on a motion for summary judgment, and writing a bench memo on an appellate issue. But the big difference for the district court is that you have a lot more work, and so things happen a lot more quickly, and you don't have as much time to really think about the issues. Also, you're not working with 2 other judges and 2 other sets of law clerks on a panel, so you don't have the nice opportunity to exchange ideas with people outside of your own chambers. The Supreme Court is definitely a entirely different beast, I would say, than the District Court and Court of Appeals clerkships. There are 4 basic buckets of work that you do as a Supreme Court clerk. You have cert pool work, so the court, of course, doesn't have to take every case that's presented to it. It gets to choose its docket. So about a third of clerks' work is just going through the cert petitions and writing memos on the petitions, making a recommendation whether the court should grant or deny cert. Do the traditional clerk work of writing bench memos on upcoming cases and drafting opinions. The 4th bucket of work is dealing with emergency applications, which certainly I think you have to do in some, because I clerked on the DC circuit, which mostly does administrative law. I had not dealt with as many emergency applications because many of those come up in, especially at the Supreme Court level, in death penalty cases. So those are the 4 different types of work that a Supreme Court clerk does. There's also a little bit more of a summer camp kind of feel to a Supreme Court clerkship. It's an all-encompassing experience, and there are very nice talks, lunches that are put together by the court for the clerks. They bring in outside speakers, and also there are weekly happy hours, which are a chance for all the clerks to get together, have dinner, talk about cases. Then you generally go back and do some more work after the happy hour. But it really builds collegiality among the clerks, and it helps communication across chambers. So it is a bit of a different experience than the other 2 levels.
Great. And Jennifer, I know that you mentioned a little bit about how your clerkship helped position you for a corporate practice. And so one of the major misconceptions about clerking is that it's only beneficial if you want to pursue a career in litigation. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how it did help prepare you for your corporate practice.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I think that clerkships are a really beneficial experience, sort of regardless of whether you go into a litigation practice, corporate, bankruptcy, tax, sort of the array of practice groups that you can choose to become, a practicing lawyer in. I think that the critical thinking skills and the writing skills that you develop as a clerk really serve you in any of those practice groups. I mean, as a lawyer, even as a corporate lawyer, you end up writing a fair amount. You write, email transmittals to clients, you write memos, and you interpret contracts. And I think a lot of, depending on what court you're in, I would say a fair amount of complex litigation these days is complex commercial interpretation. And not everyone gets sort of a deep dive into those issues in law school. And so clerking is sort of a place for you to become more familiar and facile with concepts of complex contracts and commercial relationships. I think also one thing that Josh mentioned was the pace. It's, working in a law firm is a pretty fast-paced environment, and clerking is a good way for you to transition sort of the law school, potentially more leisurely pace where you have classes and you can, study on your own terms and really transition to a more formal work setting. And so I think that it's helpful for those reasons. But also, I would say that, hopefully you're going to be a lawyer for a very long time, and this is 1 year of your life, maybe 2 or 3, depending on how many times you clerk. But I'm a big proponent of getting the experiences you want, and people in firms understand the clerk experience, and they're not going to say, why did you spend a year of your life doing that? And so, if you want to do it, go get the experiences you want, and the practice will be there for you when you're ready for it.
Great. So Josh and Jennifer have both completed their clerkships. And so since completing your clerkships, how has that experience impacted your career? I'll start with Jennifer.
I think that it's, people respect the clerk experience. Our firm's sort of an outlier in that I'd say, a fair amount of our corporate lawyers have clerkship backgrounds. And so it's a respected thing to have on your resume, and people respect that experience. I think, building your network. I'm still very good friends with my co-clerks and the folks who are in the courtship or the court, with me. And so it's helped in that respect. It's, another person, hopefully your judge and the people that are around you, to go to for advice and insight. And so I think it's helped in those ways.
Great. And Josh?
I absolutely agree with everything Jennifer said. And the other 2 points I would make is you get a sense of how the court system works and how judges tend to approach issues. If you work on appeals where there are panels of judges, then you learn not only how your particular judge approaches issues, but how other chambers approach issues. And that's very helpful, I think, especially if you plan to have a litigation practice.
Great.
Is how to write well quickly. And that's a great skill to have.
Awesome. All right. So this is a question for everyone on the panel. What do you think are the skills that are needed to be successful as a clerk? I'll start with Jennifer again.
I guess I'll pick up where Josh left off, which is writing well quickly. And that is something that you'll need. If you're not good at it on day one, you'll be very good at it at the end, because that is probably one of the core tasks as a clerk is writing. Researching and writing. So being quick and being able to pick up the voice of your judge also when, to the extent that you're writing something that he or she may say in court. And so it's sort of learning to write for a particular person as well as a very nuanced skill that is important to being a good clerk.
Great. And Josh?
Completely agree with that. The other thing I would say is attention to detail. Really have to own your research and everything that you write. And one of the things I learned very quickly in my district court clerkship in particular was that judge was just a draft. If I gave it to the judge, I had to be ready for it to be docketed in its current form. That's a very important thing to learn. And you really, the type of detail-oriented skills that something like law journal or law review hones, I think is very important for a clerkship.
Great. And Kristen?
I want to check you can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. I would add to that flexibility. When you're in law school, you have an ability to kind of control your workload. You know what's coming. You have a test a certain day. You have readings each week. But I have found that things move a lot faster and at a much less predictable pace so far in the clerkship. So being able to respond when needed, being able to pick up a project at last minute and turn it around real quick, having the kind of flexibility to handle whatever comes your way, I think is definitely something that you need.
Great.
I would agree with what everyone has said so far. Of course, legal research and writing skills are the bread and butter of what you're going to be doing every day. I think a few things that I would add, and this might be specific to the district court level, is organizational skills are really important. As a few others have mentioned, the pace of the district court can get pretty quick and you have a lot on your plate at once. So I would say being able to juggle and prioritize different tasks is really important. And then I would also say oral communication skills. I think a lot of times we think of clerks as, you know, communicating primarily through writing memos for your judge or drafting orders, but I think depending on your judge, you also need to work on, you know, conveying concisely and persuasively your legal analysis and your recommendation as well.
Great.
I think everyone summed it up pretty much beautifully. The one thing I did want to echo is learning your judge's voice. I think for me that was something that I had to pick up quickly. Everyone has their own writing style, the way you word certain things, and you may think that your writing is just amazing, but I think there's this thing, I think I heard it from one of the judicial clerkship trainings that we had, is that even a judge would critique Shakespeare. So you have to understand that everything is not right for everyone, and once you learn your judge's voice, you can adapt your writing to their style and be successful that way.
Great. All right, so what are some of the challenges of clerking? And we'll go in the opposite order this time, so we'll start with you, Rachel.
I'm trying to think. I would say maintaining the pace. In bankruptcy, there's a very quick turnaround. I think for all the courts, there's a quick turnaround time for the most part, but things are really down to the wire. So it's just a matter of you being on top of everything, really figuring out what's a priority for you at the beginning of the day, what you need to accomplish with your judge. So that's what I would say.
Okay, great. Marlo?
I would echo what Rachel said about the pace being a challenge sometimes. The other thing that I can see being a challenge is chambers is a very intimate environment, as I think a few others have already mentioned. So I think it's a lot easier for there to be personality conflict depending on the personality of your judge and your co-clerk. So that's something that could potentially be challenging at times. And the other thing I would mention that has been a little bit challenging for me, especially during an election year, is the kind of no political activity rule can be kind of frustrating at times. But I think it is actually very difficult to think of kind of downsides or negatives of clerking, which should be a good sign to anyone who's considering it. I think the pros definitely outweigh the cons.
All right. And Kristen?
I would echo what Rachel said about the pace. It's very unpredictable. You might think, oh, my workload's been cleared, and it's going to be an easy week, and then all of a sudden you've got 10 times as much work as you thought you did. Sums up my past months. So that's definitely kind of the downside, I would say.
All right. And Josh?
I would say one challenge or potential downside is that the work that you're doing is not your own, and you don't control your docket. So if that's something that's very important to you, if you just want to jump into, for example, if you're interested in pursuing a particular issue, So a public interest issue, for example. I could see someone being frustrated that you're not focusing on the thing that you went to law school to do, and instead are dealing with disputes between two big corporations and not pursuing the agenda that you care about. I think that the positives that you get out of a clerkship certainly outweigh that, and the skills that you learn will help you pursue that agenda when you get out of your clerkship. But I could see that as being a frustration for some people.
Yeah. And Jennifer?
Right. Well, sort of on that same point, when you approach issues, you're approaching them, not as an advocate on either side, but as sort of an objective lens with which to come to a decision. And although your judge may have particular bents or ways of approaching things, sort of if your focus is on pursuing an agenda, being a clerk is probably not the best forum to actually implement that pursuit, although I do think it will give you the tools to do so once you finish. But in terms of sort of more practical challenges, I think, echoing some other comments, you really are, if you're clerking for one judge, you are sort of tied to that person and that person's schedule and that person's moods. And it's just sort of you're working for one boss. And, just knowing what their vacation is, when they're going to be traveling, and making sure that you have the materials that they need before they leave, and just sort of being prepared to always sort of anticipate whatever your judge's needs are to get them the work that they need in order to sort of effectively do their job is something that you learn and pick up along the way, although it may be a bit difficult at the beginning because you're used to sort of managing your own schedule and being in control of yourself over law school.
Great. All right, so it sounds like there are definitely more upsides than downsides to clerking. So what have been your more favorite aspects of clerking? Or I guess your most favorite part of clerking? We'll start with Rachel.
Sorry. The one thing I love about my clerkship, I love the writing. I love bankruptcy. So anyone knows I walk around with like a pocket bankruptcy code this week. I love the stuff, but I love the mentorship. Like my judge is such, and I don't want to get emotional about it, but she's so, she really is someone that I look up to. She's someone that just pours into me as a person. I can go to her for advice. Like you mentioned, the close relationship in chambers, like we're right there every day seeing each other. Sometimes we can go for days and it will just be the three of us, the judge, the judicial assistant, and myself. So when you're around someone that much, you do get to learn more about them, not only professionally, but also personally. So I think in that regard, the mentorship aspect of it has been my favorite part.
Great. And Marla?
I would agree with Rachel completely that you gain an incredible lifelong mentor in your judge, and also a built-in professional network in terms of your co-clerks and past clerks and that sort of thing. And that's a huge perk to the job. I would also say, for me, the variety is really exciting, working on a generalized court and kind of encountering different substantive areas of the law every week and new kinds of motions I've never seen before. And I guess the last thing I would add is, even at the district court level, I've experienced you get an opportunity to shape the evolution of the law. There are lots of new legal questions that people haven't answered yet, and you kind of get to control or take the first stab at it, and I find that really exciting as well.
That's awesome. Kristen?
I would echo what Rachel and Marla both said. I would also add that getting to see what the advocacy side is really interesting and will be really helpful sort of going forward in the career. Like, what things can an attorney do that will not make the law clerk aggravated with them? That's kind of an important life lesson to have picked up. And it's really fun to also hear how my judge thinks attorneys did, who wrote a good brief, who had a good oral argument, who wrote a bad brief, who had a bad oral argument. That's all really kind of helpful and useful skills, and I kind of love getting that insight too.
That's great. Josh?
I think the best part of clerking is the one-on-one interaction with your judge, and I was very lucky to have 3 incredible bosses. And just to talk a little bit about Justice Ginsburg, she really took incredible care to go over her edits to opinions and explaining. She went through line by line for each edit and explained why she wanted something to be written a particular way. And that level of interaction with really a living legend was incredible. Also, we had birthday celebrations for everyone in chambers. So whenever there was a birthday, we got together and celebrated. We got to go to the opera with her to see Don Giovanni, and then got to go to a party afterward where she was really the rock star of the opera world. Everyone just really looks up to her. And then the year I was clerking was the year of her 80th birthday and also her 20th on the Supreme Court. So we had a big gala celebration that the clerks kind of helped to organize, although her assistants took much of the lead. And one of our jobs was to collect memories from former clerks and to see the outpouring of just very kind, fond memories for her was incredible.
That's great. And Jennifer?
So I never went to the opera in connection with my clerkship, but it's okay if you don't, if that's not part of it. You can still have great experiences. I think on a more mundane level, I guess I did love oral argument. I think seeing practitioners live is just something very special, and seeing it from the clerk box and sort of trying to figure out how your judge is going to react to it is just a really special experience. The bonds with your judge and with your co-clerks, I think, is something that will form lifelong memories and lifelong friendships. And sort of being in the thick of it with your co-clerks and sort of grudging through and working on really complicated issues. And then when you issue the opinion, it's sort of this wave of relief and the joy that comes with seeing it in the public and seeing practitioners read it and try to, interpret it and use it and apply it going forward as part of the legal landscape. And that's just a really special thing, I think.
Great. All right. So this next question is for Kristen and Marlo, who have both, as you've heard, are currently clerking for one court, and next year will be clerking for a different court. And so to get a little bit more insight into the application process, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how the application process worked for you, since we are post-plan world in the wild, wild west world of clerkship applications. Kind of a little bit about what did your timeline look like and kind of how that timing played out in your 2 and 3 all year with lining up your clerkships. And Marla, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I would describe my application process for my first clerkship as very organized and planned out. And for my second one, I would describe it as very wild, wild west, as you said. So I applied for my district court clerkship the summer of my 1L year, like as soon as Oscar opened up to us as rising 2Ls. And then I interviewed almost just a few weeks after I applied and accepted my offer. And then I wasn't applying for a second clerkship. It wasn't until June of this year, same month that I graduated law school actually, when one of my clinical professors reached out to me about the opportunity on the Seventh Circuit and recommended me directly to that judge. So I guess the kind of lesson that I would take from mine is, for my application process, is I think it's good to have a plan, be organized, think about, strategy in terms of what your preferences are and which courts you want to apply to first. But I think there is an element of kind of serendipity in the process that you should just, go with the flow and accept it and put yourself in a position where you have people in your corner who can help you. I think now, kind of seeing it from the other side as someone who reviews clerkship applications, I know how much of a difference it makes to have someone directly reach out to a judge to kind of vouch for you, as opposed to just using the usual channels like Oscar and other things. So that was my process.
Great. And Kristen?
A bit of a reverse. My first one was definitely applying in the wild, wild west of the clerkship era. I applied for that one the summer after my 1L year. The DC Circuit judges tend to hire earlier than other judges, so it was before Oscar even opened for 1Ls that I was doing the application and got the offer. The second one I applied for the spring of my 2L year, and I didn't hear back about that until the summer after my 2L year. You can hear me okay, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Just checking. I would very much echo what Marlo said. A lot of it is serendipity. I hadn't originally intended to apply for 2 clerkships, but I had an opportunity pop up and I decided to go for it. I definitely had a plan, and the summer after 1L did not look anything like what that plan was. So be open to opportunities. Be ready for whatever they're going to throw at you in the clerkship hiring process, and have people who are there who are going to help you through it and going to fight for you.
Great. And it's becoming more common these days for people to take a year or 2 off before clerking. And I know Rachel took a few years before going back to clerk. So I was wondering, Rachel, what advice you might have for recent grads who are interested or considering applying for clerkships?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for me, I graduated and I took a year to work at a bankruptcy firm on the creditor side, and then got into my clerkship. I think that if you're going for, I guess you can consider bankruptcy a specialty court, it is important. I think judges do give preference to people who have a focus if you're going to go for bankruptcy in that area or have practice in that area for at least a year, because I think that outside knowledge and the interest in bankruptcy is very important. In terms of the application process, I didn't do any, I still follow the same guidelines, like provide your transcript, letters of recommendation, everything like that. For me, I did a little bit of, I would say stalking, but I contacted the former clerk, and I had a friend who knew her, and I was able to speak with her about her experience and really figured out what I was potentially getting myself into, what the judge was like. So I got a lot of background about that. I also found out that my judge was going to be at a conference in Miami where I was living at the time, and I had a ticket to the conference, and I went and I introduced myself to her. And she met me that way. She knew I was applying, so it was good to kind of put a face out there to see. But I think when you are coming, and not saying that you have to do this, but if you are someone that is working right now, I think you should use your network if you have that, and really try to figure out how you can connect to the judge in some way. I do think that those things did help me. Now I'm on the other side. I do think that I agree with Marlon, when you're reviewing applications and you're seeing it, you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I would have had a chance. You know, there's so many, and so many people have such amazing resumes, but you really have to find that one thing that sets you apart. And for me, I think it was making those initial connections and really being proactive about wanting the opportunity.
Great. All right. So our last question for everybody is, what advice generally do you have for law students that are looking to apply for clerkships? And we can start with Jennifer.
So I would say start thinking about it early enough that you can have your writing sample sort of in shape and ready to go when the application is sort of time to be sent in. That's something that it might take time to develop the right writing sample, especially if there's a particular focus area that you want to go into, like bankruptcy, so sort of have it be tailored to a particular topic. And also look for your advocates and develop those relationships, whether it's really finding that one professor that you want to build that relationship with because you want him or her to be able to speak on your behalf. That's something that's going to be important for clerking and beyond. It's important to have advocates in this world as you advance in your career, and this is a good time to develop those skills.
Great. And Josh?
I think finding your advocate is the most important thing. It's very important to have someone who would be willing to make a phone call for you to a judge. And I wouldn't say necessarily that the advocate needs to be that well known of a professor. I mean, it's great if they have a huge network and they just happen to know every judge. But I think the most important thing is to have someone who can speak persuasively to your abilities and knows you well and is really willing to go the extra mile and go to bat for you.
Great. Kristen?
Echoing what was previously said, I would say be open to the possibilities that come your way. Don't get yourself so set on thinking that you know exactly the judge you want or exactly the court you want. Be willing and able to find the opportunities that come to you and open to seeking those out. I would also say, in the event that you get to an interview, be very prepared. Know the judge, know the judge's opinions, know the judge's personal history, and be ready to speak to all of that if you are lucky enough to get an interview.
Marla?
I would echo what everyone else has already said, and I would add, and I think this is a pretty important piece of advice, is just get as much information as you can about, talk to former clerks, people that have clerked on different kinds of courts, to figure out what your goals are, why you want to clerk, and I think that will make your process better if you have an idea at the outset of what you're trying to get out of it. And then related to that, try to stay true to those goals, because I think that sometimes with the pressure of prestige and maybe the career services office, you can kind of lose sight of why you originally set out to do this. So stay true to what you want, be persistent, don't get discouraged. I have friends who got clerkships really early on and friends who didn't get them to the end of law school or even out of law school. So the process is different for everyone, and don't view, a minor setback, like not getting an interview with your number one judge, as a complete failure. Just keep at it and good luck.
Great. And Rochelle?
Yeah, I would echo the same thing that Kristen said. Don't limit yourself. For example, I was practicing in Miami. I've never been to St. Louis outside of this clerkship opportunity. So when I was applying, I really cast a wide net. I applied to different courts in different areas. I did a lot of research on the judges, their opinions, and I think that really helped me narrow in on where I wanted to put most of my focus and my energy to in terms of my application. So be open. Don't get discouraged if you get a rejection letter once or twice or 3 times. Keep trying. Never give up if this is your goal. For me, it was something that I knew I wanted to have under my belt, so I never gave up. So that'd be my best advice.
Great. All great advice. Thank you all so much for joining us today. That wraps up our chat. If you have other questions for clerks about clerking or the clerkship application process, I know Marlo is writer in residence for Ms. JD and is writing a column. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer questions, and her column has some great advice for people who want to clerk. And as always, if you have questions or have a topic that you'd like to see discussed on YouTube with a panel of experts or on Ms. JD's blog, feel free to reach out to us on social media. Thanks.